Hello, folks. Welcome to Switch It. Who's for a do-over? England have regrouped and moved on to Brisbane for the second test, but must avoid another Ashes Day nightmare against the pink ball if they're to keep their hopes of a rare series win in Australia alive. 3 previous outings under the floodlights down under have resulted in defeat, and you would have to squint pretty hard to see a way back from 2-0 down. Throw in England's grisly record at the Gabatoir, and it might be standing room only among the carrion connoisseurs of Vulture Street. To help pick the bones clean in our week of pink ball prep, I'm joined by 2 wise old birds. ESPN Cricket Info UK editor Andrew Miller is with me in the studio, while deputy editor Andrew McGlashan joins us down the line from Vegas. Hello, gents. Miller, you were bullish about England's chances before the series. Can they still baseball their way to victory from 1-0 down?
Of course they can. I was always bullish that if they were going to win, they would win 3-2. I don't think there was ever any chance that England were going to go out there and not lose. I mean, we've seen what they do with baseball. They ride on the edge. They're permanently walking that tightrope. They fall off that tightrope one way or the other. It's usually thrilling and it's usually close. And I still believe it can be close. I do kind of agree with some of the sentiment about the pink ball test that, of all the moments to play a pink ball test and have a bit of a lottery, it's a bit of an upsetting moment to have a lottery. I'd rather it was a bog standard red ball game where you kind of know what conditions you're going to get for both sides. And it could be that England nail the timing and Jofra Archer steams in in the twilight and produces that killer spell that often happen in pink ball tests. It could just as easily be Mitchell Starc, in which case it's 2-0 down and there's really not much hope of salvation. I know England came back from 2-0 down in 2023, but it feels like a bit of a different iteration of baseball now. So yes, I still believe they can, and I still believe it was always likely to be chaotic, but yeah, lose this one and it's a real problem, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, those of you who have been on the site will have possibly played Miller's Build Your Own Ashes adventure and will know all the permutations from here. If not, recommend that. Nasha, good to have you on. How is Brisbane and how is, more importantly, the Courier Mail treating England's arrival in town?
Well, yeah, it's been a little bit, I think, well, I was going to say tame, although it's not actually been the Courier Mail that's been sort of creating the headlines in the last 24 hours. I think it was the Australian version of the Daily Mail papped the England players riding scooters without helmets, which has become a bit of a story today. Ollie Pope had to fend off a couple of questions about what that all meant. And he said, well, probably means we should wear a helmet next time we go out of them. It is technically the law here in Queensland. You have to wear a helmet. So technically a couple of England cricketers have been breaking the law the last couple of days. So yeah, a couple of the local papers have enjoyed that. But yeah, I think the long gap between tests has sort of taking a little bit of the sting out of everything that happened in Perth. Clearly, there was a big couple of days of reaction to that. And then mixed with the fact that England didn't go, quite rightly as it turned out, didn't go to Canberra to play in that rather nonsensical 2-day outing that even the Prime Minister couldn't attend because he double booked himself. Anthony Albanese was getting married on the first day of his own cricket match, which seems slightly unfortunate timing. So he couldn't even attend. So yeah, there wasn't much writing on that game for anybody. England did make the right decision to come here to Brisbane. And there's been a lot of close eyes on them, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of questions being asked, particularly as what around Miller just said there about the pink ball element. Australia, we know, have a fantastic record in pink ball cricket. And yeah, the questions are being asked about whether England have it in them to bounce back. There is a sort of a mood around here the last couple of days in town that people are sensing that something could happen in this test match. By that I mean that, and again, I can kind of links back to what Miller was just saying there, that because of the way England play, nobody is writing them off. Certainly, in truth, no one's writing them off yet. They might after this week if it goes badly and it is 2-0, but there is an understanding that the way England play, they could just have a wild couple of sessions and be back in this series. So there's certainly plenty of interest in the build-up to this game. And it will be fascinating to see how England respond once we do finally get back to some cricket.
Yes, that can't come soon enough. I wonder where using an e-scooter without a helmet sits on the sort of Ashesometer with buzzing, the training ground in a tiger moth being sort of at the more extreme end there, Miller.
Well, I mean, honestly, what on earth's become of the land of the larrikin? I mean, Jesus Christ! I thought you meant to be cutting edge down Australia, you know, riding
It's all about
Ned
rules,
Kelly and
isn't it?
riding on the edge of legality. It's such a police state these days. I mean, get over yourself.
Didn't Jonathan Agnew get done for jaywalking or something?
Oh, almost certainly. Yeah,
tour?
I picked up speeding tickets and coming up from down south of Melbourne. I swear they just changed the speed limit willy nilly just to catch you out. It's all deeply nefarious. But anyway, haven't been out there for a while, so I haven't got any more speeding tickets.
Well, hopefully Nash has got his helmet for when he's out and about in Brisbane. To the second test then, after a 10-day gap, one of the inevitable side effects of losing as precipitously as England did, Miller, is the rush to fill the dead space, and there's been the usual criticism of the touring party. In particular, Ben Stokes came out to fend off the accusation of arrogance.
Well, indeed. I mean, when you lose in 2 days and there was already a decent sized gap between matches, you end up with an enormous 14-day gap in an Ashes cycle, which has just been filled with nonsense, frankly. I mean, you alluded to the game, the game theory thing I set up, which was basically my attempt. I was basically trying to write something deep and meaningful. What does all this mean? What are the permutations? And I realised it was absolute froth and nonsense. England could quite easily lose 5-0 and everyone would be able to retrofit it and say that's exactly why they've lost. They could easily win 3-2 and retrofit it and say exactly that's why they lost, and so or why they won rather. And so this is why I came up with my notion of, well, let's hack out the permutations here. And fundamentally, my view hasn't changed throughout. If England stick to their principles, they can win. If they veer away from their principles, I think they will get squashed now. That is the danger. You cannot go this far down one road professing you're going to do things differently in Australia and then allow yourself to be swayed by all the noise and all the 14 days of chat that has gone on. And so I can understand why England ducked out of the pink ball practice game. Given the shambles that was, there was a sort of Constance bowling a full bunger at one stage. It's like, yeah, this is exactly the sort of prep that England did not need. Just a waste of time, opportunity really to get out cheaply and sit there twiddling your thumbs rather than just hunker down, ignore the noise, and get on with it. But, I'm sure we'll get on to the selection, but, England have gone for Will Jacks over Shoaib Bashir, which is, early days yet, and it may just be a recognition that actually they're not convinced that spin will play a big part, so let's shore up the batting. But it could, and again, this all comes down to the retrofitting that will happen if it goes wrong. It could feel like a moment where England are just veering away from those principles, that they've been very good at sticking to the team that they trust. Shoaib Bashir has been picked for 2 years for a very specific purpose of being the man who can win a test match in Australia. And if at the moment that England really, really need to be able to lean on a guy who has been trained for this moment, they say, I'm not sure he's ready for it. That is a worry. That's a sort of contagious lack of faith that can set things pinballing. But again, it's all froth, it's all nonsense, because no one's bowled a ball in this pink ball test, and it could be a perfect masterstroke, kind of a counter-attacking number 8 coming out to basball it under the lights, get England the extra runs they need, and then 4 seamers is plenty to roll through Australia. I mean, it could be the ideal pick, but until we get round to actually reviewing rather than previewing in this endless morass of speculation, it's all just more froth in the wind.
Either tactical brilliance or yes, another domino falling. Check back here in a week to find out which. Nasha, you sort of referred at the top there to it kind of England making the correct call around keeping the group together. In the end, we were lots of discussion in the immediate aftermath of Perth. In the end, only Jacob Bethel, Matt Potts and Josh Tongue went across. And I guess England were quite firm eventually anyway. They clearly mulled it over, but that this is the conditions in Brisbane were likely to be that much different. And as it turned out, a sort of a 2 innings, a 1 day game spread over 2 days, basically, with, as Miller notes, Sam's Constance bowling. it seems as if that, while they were getting heavily criticised and quite a lot of pelters for, I think Michael Vaughan certainly said it would be amateurish if they didn't send anyone. They've obviously opted to keep the group together, and it sounds like they've maybe swerved, what could have been a bit of a shambles there.
Yeah, and they've been training pretty intensely here in Brisbane. It was funny, actually, just speaking to a couple of the UK press pack at the Nets last night. A couple of them did say that there's a chance that England will kind of had a test match worth of nets, in a sense, like 5 days of nets for a test match that may not go anywhere near 5 days itself. So they've had certainly no shortage of practice here in Brisbane. The nets have looked, a couple of the nets at the Gabba have looked a bit spicy. You've heard a couple of the batters sort of complaining a bit when the ball's been rearing up and things like that. Each team has had 2 solid night sessions. So it does feel as though that on balance, it was the sensible decision rather than going to Canberra on what it wasn't the slowest pitch that I've ever seen in Canberra. Actually, the new ball did go through a little bit, particularly for Josh Tongue, actually, who I know we now know isn't going to play this test match, but he was sort of in the mix when Mark Wood was initially ruled out, and he did get the pink ball to go through quite nicely. But yeah, and certainly from a batter's point of view, the side that the PM's 11 it was very heavily weighted towards young Australian batters. Constance Wade, of course, McSweeney, Campbell Kellaway, who's a very good young player. So there was far more emphasis on the Australian batting. The bowling was very much makeshift, including the 41-year-old Peter Siddle, just shortly after the anniversary of his hat-trick at the Gabba 15 years ago. So no doubt the batters would not have got a huge amount out of it, albeit Jacob Bethel didn't take his chance. He was the only one of the England top order not to get any runs in that game. He may be needed at some point in this series if there's an injury. But yeah, certainly on balance, it was the right call to be made by England, and they seem to have got most of what they wanted, I think, out of training, having watched them for a couple of days here in Brisbane.
The other aspect of that quick finish was that filling that gap involved vox popping quite a lot of disappointed English fans in Perth, and I mean Stokes seemed to take that. There's a PR element to this. He kind of acknowledged the disappointed fans, and it's a 5-game series. We've got 4 games to go. Absolutely desperate to come home with the Ashes. Obviously, England have got to say that, but they really do need to sort of hold it all together for this one, or else, as you say, the pick your own adventure, the 5-ball, the snowball towards 5-0 is just going to pick up speed.
Yeah, I mean the irony of all of this is that in losing in 2 days, England still came closer to winning in Australia than they have done in any test for 15 years. So I think you have to take it with a pinch of salt. I know several people who because of the time zone stayed up just long enough to see England get that early wicket that bowled Australia out, and then watch England do all right after Zach Crawley got out, and went to bed. Get to lunch, yeah, or scrape to lunch at whatever it was, 4 in the morning over here, and then sleep, and then not wake up until it was all over, and think, what the hell happened there? So the sense at which, obviously, a huge missed opportunity, and the shell shock in Stokes' voice was real, but also this team would not be this team and everything they built towards for 3.5 years if they have not used this time to focus on the positives. That sounds glib, but that's literally everything that they do in the Stokes McCullum dressing room is puff each other up and say, "Go on, you did brilliantly," and they did brilliantly at key moments of that game. They really did. The only person who probably didn't do brilliantly, ironically, is Mark Wood, who's actually went wickless, didn't bowl as well as I think he could have done, and obviously his knee is sore, but it's actually not a bad test for him to miss, in my opinion. I mean, obviously the knee is a worry, and we'll look at that further down the line with obviously quite a back to come, but it's not a bad test for him to miss this one. I think England may be more of a scalpel than a sledgehammer approach needed on this pitch with this ball, and in Jofra Archer, who looked incredibly good form, and again a bit more time to build back his energy. I would be astonished if England do not come out believing that they have roughed up Australia once with the method of attack they've got, and can do it again with 14 days to rest up and go hard. So there's all to play for, absolutely all to play for. But yeah, I still do wish, and again, I think it's a credit to Australia's scheduling to a degree, that they've front loaded with this slightly awkward Perth, then the pink ball test. Gives them that heads up. Obviously, they've only lost 1 out of 14, whereas England have only won 2 out of 7, I think, and lost all 3 times in Australia. I do wish it wasn't a lottery test. And you say that, obviously it doesn't sound like a lottery when Australia have that record, but given what you know about the conditions and how they can change so quickly, I think it would probably suit England better and the way they play better to be able to just go hard regardless of conditions, rather than feeling like the conditions might rush their approach in the ways that, obviously up top they did it famously in Mount Maunganui a few years ago. They declared after batting 60 overs, I think, didn't they? So they could bowl in the twilight. That sort of funky thinking worked in 2023. I think this iteration of England and everything we've seen already, I think England are probably going to be veering away from being funky. I think Stokes clearly showed that in the way he bowled to Travis Head. England bowled to Travis Head in that final innings. They didn't play out of the box of their field placings or their bowling options in the way that they might have done 2 or 3 years earlier. So yeah, there's a little bit about where England are at in this whole cycle that does concern me. Whether the chat and the defeats and the attrition, I suppose, has got to them, but equally, They knew what they're getting into for this tour. They've known for 4 years basically that this is everything they've been building towards, and so much the chat, they've heard it all before. I mean, Stokes in particular has heard it all before. Given his history with Australia, he's had it front and centre for every time he's been out there. So it's nothing new to them. But yeah, just controlling that mentality that seemed so bulletproof at times in their previous iterations. It doesn't seem so bulletproof now, and that I suppose is the danger. Really, they've got to win. They've got to win. If they don't win this, then 5-0 does feel entirely imminent, entirely feasible.
Yes, sadly, I think many will sympathise with that view. Clearly, Bazball is funky from the outset. Pink ball tests are funky. How much funk can this Ashes handle? We're going to find out. The other fun thing, Nasha, from the Perth test, I mean, there was obviously lots of talk about the catering going to waste, or not going to waste because it was donated, and I think the Perth stadium manager said they should have played a beer game, but a couple of days later, the ICC rated the pitch as very good, which I'm sure caused a stir in some cricketing circles. Certainly at the Khawaja house, Usman Khawaja had a different view on it.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a week or 10 days for Uzi Khawaja, hasn't it? Yeah, look, I mean, 12 months ago, a test match played out kind of in a similar way against India. There were 17 wickets on the first day that time. And then just at the time that Travis Head was going in this test match, that's when India were more sedately piling up their huge second innings, which then led to them winning that game comfortably. So if this test had taken a more, so to say, natural tempo, we might have seen it play out similarly. Of course, everything went in fast forward in the end, but that pitch was rated very good as well last year. Again, to some disgruntlement in other places, this one rated very good. And yeah, Usman Khawaja had his say. He sort of made some valid points in what he was saying too. He was saying, look, Stephen Smith is one of the best batters of all time, and he was getting hit 3 or 4 times during what wasn't a massively long stay in the middle, but he's obviously had other things on his mind as well this week, Uzi Khawaja, and obviously coming to a head today with being ruled out of this second test match. And we now get into what is the future of Usman Khawaja, and will he play test cricket again? So yeah, it's been an interesting week for Usman Khawaja. We'll see where the rest of this Ashes series goes for him, but I think there is a very realistic chance we've probably seen the last test match of Khawaja's career, and it would be a slightly unfortunate way for it to end if it was how it ended in Perth, with him nicking off to cast at number 4 and not being able to bat in the second innings. So yeah, interesting time when it comes to Usman Khawaja's career, and obviously it's having significant sort of bearing now on how Australia shaping up their side.
Okay, so England have reverted to their usual practice of naming their 11 2 days out from the start. Will Jacks is in and will play his first test since 2022. Australia still mulling their selection, but have confirmed that Khawaja won't play. Miller, you touched on Jacks as the spin option, leapfrogging Bashir. The fear is that these plans that have been in place, Bashir hand-picked, groomed for this tour, high release point, tall, overspin. He's our Nathan Lyon, and then he's left out the first two tests. That's them diverting from the course that they've set out. But there are some logical reasons for having that. I guess lengthening the tail and having a player that can contribute in both facets in a game where there are some unknowns.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, although lengthening the tail is a slightly weird way to go about it, given the tail was already stupendously lengthy already. I mean, you've got a man who's got a test century going to come in at number 10 in Gus Atkinson, and Jofra Archer's no mug at number 11. I mean, it's about as strong as you could possibly hope for. So to add a number 8 just for the sake of bulking out the order feels a slightly wrong way to go about things, especially given everything we were talking about England going into the series, thinking that that top 7 is about as strong as England have taken to Australia in 15 years, basically since the last time we won out there. And lots of people have done their head-to-head. Who would you pick out of in the direct head-to-head between Australia and England? And broadly speaking, it's not been universal, but broadly speaking, most people have said I'd pick more of England's batters and more of Australia's bowlers. So it seems weird that England would bin off a bowler to add another batter. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. It's not that Jacks is a bad bowler. I just don't think he's a particularly wonderful one. I mean, I clearly he has a lot of faith at Surrey. He has, Gareth Batty has gone down this route at Surrey where he has trusted his all-rounders to be their spinners over several seasons. Their run of county championships and near misses is testament to the fact that they have a method there that works, and he certainly has got overs under his belt as a consequence of that. And I suppose he was picked because he was the high release point equivalent. If they weren't going to go with Bashir, he wasn't going to skid it through in the way that Jack Leach say might, and so there is a similarity there. But it's not a lot to go on. But I remember watching him bowling. I think he got that 6 for in Pakistan on debut, and a lot of that was felt at the time like just reaping the rewards of batsmen just swinging for the hills on a dead deck and getting caught in the deep endlessly. It was a famous test that England
6 for 150 or
exactly
something.
That it was wild times. So if the pitch goes that flat, that England are going to resort to bowling lollipops outside off and hoping that they get hoiked to deep point. Is that really what you want to be picking your team for? If the pitch goes that flat, though, again, I don't think England will mind, because we've seen that England are actually pretty handy on flat deck pitches. Particularly their batters will back themselves to go harder and longer and faster than Australia. Travis Head perhaps accepted. So I suppose where it comes down to is, if the pitch is spicy, England won't need a spinner, so therefore you don't bother to pick a spinner and you've got a number 8 as insurance. And if the pitch is flat, then everyone's going to get tonked, but England are going to score more runs. So let's just load up on runs, and then you can set your fields for the miscue, and you can take your 20 wickets because in theory England will have bought themselves enough time to win by the speed with which they score a lot of runs, if you see what I mean. So I suppose it's planning for the best case, but equally they don't know quite which best case they're looking for here, so they've hedged their bets, and that worries me, because I don't think England hedging their bets is a very good place. They've been very good at a lot of and they don't believe in using the word baseball, but a lot of the investment into what people think baseball is you commit to your option. We'll back you 100% as long as the option you believe is right. And I'm not sure England have committed to an option here, so that in itself feels like a bit of a dichotomy in their thinking.
Yeah, yes, I was going to say having a bob each way, but you've put it much more eloquently. Doesn't feel very Bazball, but Nasha, come to you here because I guess a lot of this is going to come down to what the conditions are like, and there's talk about how pink ball tests in Brisbane differ to Adelaide, and when the pink ball goes soft, it can be pretty attritional, I think, and run scoring becomes easier. There have been some higher scores, certainly a long time ago now, but Pakistan threatened to chase about 450 in a day-night game at the Gabba. Obviously, the one day-night game Australia lost came there against West Indies, and Vish sort of highlighted the role that Kevin Sinclair, I think, played, which might be what England are looking at with Jacks. But what's the feeling on the ground, and where are Australia heading with the selection? Because Nathan Lyon has a very good record with a pink ball, but there had been some chat after Perth about whether they might sort of try and get Beau Webster into their team.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has been noted the last 2 or 3 days here how green the surface has looked at the Gabba. The groundsman spoke to us today and said he's preparing what he calls a normal pitch. Interestingly, he said he doesn't change anything really between prep for day-night games, prep for one-day games, prep for 4-day games, day games, red ball cricket. He says it all stays pretty normal. He reckoned he would have about 3 to 4 mil of grass would be left on the surface for the first day. So he's planning for a true, I guess you could call it, normal Gabba surface. But the interesting factor is, as you said there, is how the pink ball goes here in Brisbane, and it is a bit different to Adelaide. The general consensus here is that Damien Hoff, the groundsman at Adelaide Oval, has got the preparation for pink ball cricket just about right, in that there's enough grass on it that in a sense softens it for the pink ball, so that's not bashed out of shape as quickly, because it is a known fact that the pink ball goes softer quicker. It was something that Mitchell Stark spoke about during that West Indies test match here 2 years ago, and the general view is that it's not as ideal a location for a day-night test as Adelaide Oval. So that will be an interesting watch during this game if England are able to bat. If either side is able to bat into that 50-60 over period with only a handful of wickets down, what that ball is doing or not doing will be very interesting to watch. And then that role of the spinner potentially does become more important. That test match you referenced against the West Indies line played an important holding role on a very hot day at the Gabba. So I think there will be a part for spin to play at some point. So to answer your question there, 99% sure that Nathan Lyon will be playing this test match. There had been a set of scenarios where it was a valid debate to have because he bowled so little in Perth. He didn't play Australia's most recent pink ball test in the West Indies, and he only bowled 1 over, I think, in the pink ball test against India in Adelaide last year. So it wasn't a debate without merit, but I would be very, very surprised if he isn't in that team for this test match. And then the other thing Australia have to weigh up now is which replacement batter comes into the side with Usman Khawaja not playing. It sounds like Travis Head will open. It would seem bizarre if he doesn't after what happened in Perth. There are a couple of other scenarios Australia could go down, but it does sound like they'll move Travis up and replace him in the middle order, which is either Joss Inglis or Beau Webster. And interestingly, tonight at training, the indications were that it looked like it's going to be Inglis. He did a lot of time in the slips cordon. He was at third slip. Marnus had gone to first to replace Khawaja. Beau Webster, who would be a lock in that cordon, didn't do any slip catching work. So if that is any guide, and sometimes these can be a bit of a false lead 2 days out from a game, but if that's any guide, it looks like it'll be Inglis in the middle order, and they do like him as a counter punch to short pitch bowling. They've referenced him in the same bracket this season in the Mitchell Marsh debate, which we've all had some fun with, whether Mitch Marsh would come back, but they have noted how often England's bowls will go short, and they do think Inglis has the game to take that on and counter punch if England do decide to try and go on a bouncer barrage again. So at the moment, it looks like Inglis into that middle order, which means Beau Webster's going to be unlucky for a second test in a row. He was unlucky to lose his place in Perth. He will be unlucky not to get it back here. But it does feel like Inglis will be the man in the middle order.
And on the bowling, we known about this for a few days, but still no Pat Cummins, which feels a bit like Australia maybe being cautious, perhaps, going 1-0 up in the manner that they did. They can afford to say, oh, well, actually, it'll be good to keep Cummins, in our back pocket for say Adelaide. Although you'd imagine then he's probably only going to play 2 of the last 3, given the short turnarounds. No Hazelwood as well, but Mitchell Starc, who was pretty effective in Perth, is an even greater weapon with the pink ball. 81 wickets at 17.
Yeah, and this comment could well date very badly by the time people are listening to this show, but kind of, I think there is still not absolutely certain that Pat Cummins does not make a surprise appearance in this game, sort of thing. There is still that. They've left the door just slightly ajar by never slamming it shut. They've been quite clever with their wording. He keeps bowling very well in training. Interestingly, yesterday he had 2 spells separated by a stint of batting, which again suggested a player very close to making a comeback. So while still very unlikely that he'll play in this test match, he is getting very, very close. And then, Adelaide seems like the natural comeback point for him. Josh Hazelwood's due to be with the squad tomorrow to do a bit of bowling as well. He's a bit further back, so might not be an option till Melbourne or potentially Sydney, but it could get into a scenario where they're able to rotate their quicks during that more congested period from Adelaide through Melbourne through Sydney. So if any of those tests do go deep, Australia may have sort of timed their run with their quicks quite effectively. But of course, back to Starc. He's 81 wickets at 17 in pink ball cricket. Not bad for a format that he didn't really think had a place when it came in 10 years ago, but he's seen what it's done to the average. So he's quite happy for it to have 1 or 2 tests a year that he plays in. And it's going to be, look, everyone's kind of, especially if England bat first, everyone's eyes is going to be on whether Mitchell Starc can set that tone again. We obviously saw him do a job twice on Zach Crawley in Perth. That first over record, that first spell record he has is incredible. So it will be very interesting to see how England approach Starc and whether they, I say, take any different approach. And as Miller's been saying, it'd be very dangerous for England to change tack much. And in this test match, it was interesting listening to Ollie Pope today speak. He was talking more about his little duel he had with Scott Boland in that second innings in Perth, where it was Pope that blinked first and went after the wide one and nicked off. And he was saying, like, well, if Australia do keep throwing it out there outside of stump, it is kind of, if they get it wrong, it's still a scoring opportunity. So they're still looking at it from a very attacking point of view. So I think they'll take on whatever Starc and Boland and Doggett, if that is the trio, hurl down with the pink ball. And as Miller said a little while ago, like, it was amazing the feel of that test match after one day, as opposed to how it finished less than 24 hours later. England were well and truly in that game. So to go back to what you were saying before about taking the positives out of a 2-day defeat, that's the sort of thing they'll be talking about. And like, I don't think it was a theme leading into the first test. I don't think England need 400, 450 to be competitive in this series. They need 250, 300. And when that stand of Smith and Brook was going on the first day in Perth, they were 160 for 5. If those two had been together another 10 overs, 250 was realistic there, and England were probably winning that test match. So it still feels like a series that's going to be decided on some pretty fine margins.
I'm sure they've been mainlining positives for the past 10 days. If Pat Cummins does walk out at the toss tomorrow, 2 days now, anyway, whatever day it is that they're starting, then you heard it here first. Miller, Bazball's going to Bazball, of course. Can they bat smarter? Should they be trying to bat smarter in the manner of, say, you think back to Old Trafford against South Africa, kind of immediate aftermath of one of their first Bazball blowouts, when they sort of batted steadily and Stokes got 100, I think Ben Folkes as well, or Lords in the summer against India, I think 3.5 and over, Root doing the grind. They clearly do have that club in their bag, to borrow from golf, coincidentally or otherwise. But I mean, that's the advice I seem to be getting from all the old pros. That's not necessarily the way that
they do have that. They do have that
go.
club. That club is Joe Root, and Joe Root's performance in that first test was probably the most glaring point of failure that England produced. Worse, I think, than Zach Crawley's, because of the manner in which, particularly that second innings. Okay, you got a good nut in the first innings, that happens, but that second innings, he looked skittish in a way that we talk about Ollie Pope looking skittish and not starting well. We never really talk about Joe Root not starting well. He came out, he was clearly looks like a guy who realizes there's a lot of legacy hanging on this series. There's a lot of chat about that missing century, that need to impress. And after getting a duck in his first innings of a legacy defining series, he was very proactive. First ball, the second innings, he came down the pitch, clipped off his pads, got off the mark. I thought, okay, that's good. He didn't hang around, didn't wait to rack up a pair. He just got on with it, but then he kept going on with it. And when those 2 wickets fell after lunch, when Pope and Duckett had gone as well, and Brooke as well, and then he plays that wild drive on the up, inside edges onto his stumps. It's like that's one of the least Joe Root dismissals I've ever seen. And there's no reason to think that Root would have played that way if it hadn't been nerves of some sort, whether it's that pressure to fulfill his own legacy or just the pressure of the occasion. Something got to him in a way that you don't see very often. So I'm pretty confident that won't happen to him again. I think he's got the first night nerves out of the way. I think he will settle down into the series. If he doesn't, England are screwed, put it that way. So he has to settle down into the series. But there was something jittery about the way that he went about his game that time out that was a bad omen and was the killer blow. Because for all that England didn't bowl very well to Travis Head, and Travis Head produced a magnificent Ashes defining moment, England lost that game in that crazy 15 minutes after lunch when they lost 3-0 in particular. They lost, what was it, 5 for 23 all told, but that 3-0 that included Root getting out, driving on the up in exactly the way that he was not meant to do on a pitch like that, was the car crash moment. You got that viral clip of Stuart Broad just looking grim while Matthew Hayden gives it the pork chop and next door to him. It's like you could see everything about England's position in that game corroded in that one moment. That one shot was everything. If Root had got through that moment and England had built a lead that extended into, say, the 60th over, everyone talks about not batting beyond 60 overs. England didn't bat beyond 40. So, if England had got to 60 overs playing the way that they play, with Root playing the way he plays, you're looking at a chase that's 300 plus rather than 200. So that is where England lost it, and that's where England can win it. If Root finds a way to hunker down. It was interesting again, it talks about Stokes fronting up, and the fact that Root fronted up too, I thought was very interesting. England have front loaded their big guns in this lull. They've thought that we've got to get ahead of the message here. We can't just hide. I mean, the Aussie media narrative is England are hiding and ducking away from facing up to their failures, but actually no, they're just hunkering down. But they both those guys have fronted up to try to go again better.
Has spoken again today as well.
Exactly. So it's all going on. So I'm pretty confident that Root cannot play that badly again, and therefore something about England's performance will be improved in the second test. Whether that's the only thing could be the decisive factor, I suppose.
That's the optimism we're here for. On something that Root said, and I'll perhaps get both your views on this, but Nasha, as the Aussie representative, don't think you need them. Pink ball Ashes tests. What's the counter view?
Well, they're a staple of the Australian summer now. They are the one country that has taken them on and sort of played them consistently since that first one. I'm personally not a massive fan of them, but that may be some selfish reasons coming into that. But and I kind of get where Root is coming from, in the fact that, you're not needing to sell this series, which was one of the initial things behind pink ball cricket, was the need to draw people in. There's also the broadcast element as well. It puts into more cricket into that evening prime time. slot. But over here in Australia, they're not thought of as anything other than just part of the summer. Yes, clearly some of the players would prefer not to play them. I mean, Steve Smith is not a fan of them. He's been training with those eye patches this week to try and help him sort of get through that glare that comes in and things like that. So he's always been quite vocal at not being a fan. I mentioned Mitchell Stark before. He's sort of been turned around by his own success in the format. Travis Head, of course, came out with a very punchy response to Root's comments, sort of thing, which is easy to do when you're 1-0 up. And again, they have a familiarity with the format. So we're going back to the lottery stuff about this test. Like, Australia do accept that there's a degree of lottery about it, but I think they feel a little bit more attuned to adjusting to those periods in a way that won't lose them the game. And Marnus Labuschagne actually made an interesting point yesterday. It was put to him, actually, is the toss too important in pink ball cricket, in that if you win it and bat first, you're guaranteed at least half a day in normal daylight? And he said, well, look, they lost the toss against India in Adelaide last summer and won the game. And crucially, what they were able to do is they knocked India over. They bowled well. And you were questioning whether it actually been a disadvantage because they were then batting in that night session. But Marnus Labuschagne, and as it was then Nathan McSweeney, got through. Australia, I think, were 80 for 1 at the close of the first day. They were then batting in the daytime on day 2. Travis Head flays a runner ball century and the test match is over. Australia then bowl at night on the second day. So the point being, I think Australia, about sensing those moments, they probably feel with that familiarity of 14-day night tests under their belt that they can potentially adjust to that better than perhaps the uncertainty that comes with a team that plays them once every number of years when they essentially tour Australia and maybe one of the two other countries. So, yeah, again, Australia might feel differently if they lose this test match and it's 1-1. But it doesn't sound like they're going to go anywhere either. You can make what you will of the fact that 150th test match in anniversary test rather in 2027 is a pink ball game. Not sure that's really paying homage to the history of test match cricket. but beyond that, the bilateral series here in Australia, I think it's going to remain apart for the foreseeable future. So yeah, I think it's just something that they're more comfortable with. It's not the wow factor for them that, say, it was when it first started.
And England just have to adapt, I guess, Miller. But the advantage there is that Australia play it every summer, and England play one every. Well, they play 2 in New Zealand as well, but once or twice every 4-year cycle. It's tough
it's not ideal. I mean, I saw quite a convincing argument about the logic for not just that test, but also the scheduling. In that, given that 4/5 of the Australian population live on the east coast. This scheduling has had Perth of the first test outside of the school holidays, so obviously that finishes later in the day. Then you've got the pink ball test that finishes in the prime time, and then you get to the next 3 tests, Adelaide, as close to Christmas as possible, then the festive tests that are basically, everything is designed to ensure that as many people are able to be off work, say, to watch as much of the cricket as possible. I mean, if I was being mischievous, I'd suggest it's a little bit saving Test cricket vibes to go down that scheduling. I mean, I thought that wasn't the sort of thing that was required in this day and age, but
not in Australia.
Not in Australia, because Australia don't need to save their Test cricket, except obviously clearly their scheduling does seem to lend itself to saving something. So yeah, I mean,
they need to save a few quid because they lost a lot of it.
Well, exactly, yeah. So there we go. That's something. But I think it is. I mean, it's interesting. Root to make himself a little bit of hostage to fortune by complaining about it now. If England go and lose, then that's yet more grist for the papers to climb on. But I think England are kind of over that side of the media storm. They'll just have to ride whatever comes to them and see where they are at the end of it all.
Okay, well, before we go, there has been some sad news that has come out this morning, is that the former England batter, much-loved character Robin Smith, has died aged 62. And Miller, he obviously had a very colourful career post-playing as well. I mean, the greatest sadness because it was only a week or so ago that when England were in Perth, he was speaking to the newspapers and so on about his life and overcoming some of those challenges. But obviously, we've heard as we've heard today, he has passed on.
Yes, it's such sad news. I mean, he was one of my earliest heroes in the game. I mean, I think it goes for pretty much anyone of my age who grew up watching cricket in the 1980s, 1990s. I mean, Robin Smith just stood toe to toe with the greatest fast bowlers of the age. You know, his square cut was the most powerful thing since He-Man. Frankly, it was incredible to watch, and he just gave you hope, he gave you optimism, he gave you a reason to keep tuning in when the beating started coming. You always believed that Robin Smith would stand tall and you know, bob and weave and cut and drive and stand firm in a way that so few others could. I was always deeply frustrated that his career was cut short early. I do sense it contributed to some of his later issues, to be perfectly honest. I mean, he was at 32, still in the prime of his career when he played his last test in 1996, partly because there was this perception that he was very weak against spin, and you know, a lot of that I think was, you know, we talk a lot about baseball and mind games and all the rest of it. A lot of it was in his head. Shane Warne in particular got into his head, and ironically, they became firm friends. They obviously played together at Hampshire and were in touch with each other constantly. But you know, he always refused to face him in the net, so he didn't have further embarrassment. He had, you know, a very stiff-wristed technique that was very good for fast bowling, but obviously when trying to negotiate spin, it was less effective. But I felt he was a bit of an unlucky scapegoat to be chopped at that particular juncture of England. I think he could have had another 5 years at least of being a mighty batsman for England, and you know, his average of 43.67, I think. I think only Gower and Thorpe among his contemporaries averaged more, and you know, both of them count among the greats that England have ever produced. And so, really sad day, and you know, a great icon of English cricket lost.
Nasha, was he someone you encountered out in Perth at all?
Not while I've lived over here, but he was someone, I mean, similar to Andrew's story there, really. Kind of, I remember him so vividly from that 95 series against the West Indies in England. There was that horror pitch at Edgbaston where he made, I think it was twin 40s in that game, and they were, I know it's a cliche to say they were worth 100, but they were worth 100 and plenty. And that ducking and weaving that Andrew that spoke about just then. But then the following test match at Old Trafford, which England famously won to level it up at 2-2, he became my first autograph I ever got at a cricket match. I'd waited on the boundary hoping to get, and Curtly Ambrose is in one of his, he wasn't talking to anyone. I stood there for half an hour waiting for Curtly, and then England had finished their batting, and then they came out to field late. I think it was on the third day, and Robin Smith came down to third man, and he was very gracious, and the whole row of kids and some adults as well queued up for his autographs, and I got a little Gray Nichols bat signed by him. So that's just he was just someone growing up watching England in the 90s. There weren't that many great memorable days, there were a lot of memorable days, not always maybe for the right reasons, watching England in the 90s, but Robin Smith was part of some famous wins, and that 95 series was one of England's finest achievements in that era, to draw 2-2 with what was still a very, very good West Indies side, albeit on starting to go on the wane slightly. But Robin Smith had a huge part to play in that, and even in that series it dealt with obviously being shuffled around the order, and he started as an opener when Ray Lingworth decided to experiment with the batting order, finally found his way back to number 5, where, as Miller just said, he should have played far more for England. So just a wonderful cricketer, and very sad, obviously, the news that's come out today.
And I think just on that, I think I'm right in saying that there was that point in 1991 again against West Indies, another epic 2-2 series going toe to toe, that England had him and Gooch ranked 1 and 2 in the world rankings, which I think was the last time it happened until Root and Brook recently. So, which just goes to show that, you know, England did have some mighty world class players even in those dog days in the 90s, when all of us around this table grew up to somehow fall in love with this game, and he was a key component of that.
And they were losing to Australia then; they're losing to Australia now. But, R.I.P. Judge. That will do it for today. The Brisbane test starts in the small hours of Thursday morning UK time. We'll be back to see if this Ashes is just another slow motion car crash for England, only this time in fast forward. Until then, My thanks to Miller and Nasha, and to you all for tuning in to the Switch It podcast on espncricinfo.com.